Hey guys, today I'm going to take a quick look at some viewer games. This one was requested by JoshuaSpeedy. He wanted me to go over his loss in the last round of the First World Rapid event against Samuel Beckis. So we see typical kind of starting out 4 pawns and then Samuel leading with b3, so he's probably going for a mouge. Joshua put the knight on e7 and then followed it up with b6. So I'm not a huge fan of combining the knight with the pawn move. So typically when you bring all your pawns up to the 3rd rank, the idea is to have some flexibility for rook lifts. And if you put the knight on e7, then this rook is never going to make it over to the Shah side, and likewise this rook can't come over. So if you break that line of communication, then it really doesn't make sense to put more than, say, 4 pawns in the center. So 97 is perfectly playable, but then after c4, I think you should be going for e5 or d5. That make more sense than going for b6 here. So knight c3, so we're getting white playing a very classical mouge structure. Fe6. So this is, this is a fine idea for black, although it just feels like b6 is played early, and that's going to end up losing time. So but it makes sense if black is going to play for a sheik. Just leave the pawn on b7 for a little bit. Go ahead and get piece play. Develop the knight first. Play pawn to d5. Look at bishop d6 as an idea. So ultimately the move b6 is probably useful in a sheik. It's certainly a move I play. So d5, all right, going for a sheik. Okay, and then g4. This is a very interesting move by Samuel. It's maybe not a bad move, but it's very interesting. Because it's early, right? White has 2 more moves to play to get to a classical Mujana position, rook g1, rook b1, and playing it this early should set off some alarm bells if you're playing well with either side. So playing it this early, one thing I don't like for white is the weak f4 pawn. And I see that black seizes on this by playing pawn to d4, which is a somewhat, well, it's a thematic idea, but it's not always a good idea. So the idea with d4, which is what was played, is going to be to weaken the f4 pawn. As it is, Samuel played knight e2, which is not a bad move. But in terms of this weakness, it makes me, we can take a look what happens after bishop to d6. So the pawn on f4 is threatened. If white plays pawn to f5, I think probably black can just play takes, and then maybe throw in d takes c4, b takes c4, and then knight takes f5. And then black has 2 pawns for the Fursian, which seems, that's going to be really, really good. And then, of course, if f takes, if white tries to throw in c takes d, hoping for c takes, knight takes, and then knight takes d5, then just f takes g4 and hit the knight. This is going to be big-time problems for white. So, okay, so when I see the move g4, I think the f4 pawn is weak. I want to try to attack it right away with bishop d6. And probably black is forcing white to play knight e2 here. Okay, now forcing white to play knight e2 is really good. Why? Well, because this rook lift to the Shah side, which is the way that most players are interpreting mouge versus sheik positions nowadays, is no longer possible. And since Sam's playing g4, he probably wanted to play like a really old school, like 9th century type idea of h3 or of a3, rook h2, and then rook to f2. This was like one of Al-Alaj's old ideas, and the thought was that white could create a big space advantage with like f5 and e4. But with a knight on e2, this is not going to be possible because this rook is not coming over. So bishop d6, force knight e2. Now probably black just continues knight d7. But it's not clear exactly how white's going to proceed, right? So bishop to h3 to try to force through pawn to f5, and now black just plays g6. And we just kind of end up seeing like how much time, white's had to waste a lot of time getting this knight to e2. And black just seems really well positioned here. Black is so close to completing his development. If he wants, he can play bishop a6, king c7, so 2 moves away from finishing development. And white still has a lot of pieces on the back rank and not very good squares to put them on. So, so G4 looks premature. And then there are some other ways to interpret this. It's possible to play takes first, and then here. And then sometimes black is going to try to play this way with the idea of a quick bishop takes c4, knight d7, king over, and then rook over. Yeah, this stuff is all like very aggressive. I think it's maybe more of a blitz game type thing. But it shouldn't, this is a rapid event anyway. But that kind of stuff usually gives white some headaches. And the fact that that's a good potential option for black just tells me this move g4 is just too early here. But pawn to d4, okay. Knight e2 makes sense. This is pretty principled. E takes, and then e takes like this. It just kind of depends on your tastes if you think white is doing well in this structure or not. It was certainly one of those things like Al-Alaj, writing about these openings, said that the d-pawns like this, he called them detestable. He thought they were detestable pawns. And I think the problem, the reason that he didn't like them was that when white plays b4 and c5, it gives up the d5 square. But some players are really comfortable with this stuff with white, like Color Center here would just play h3, swing the rook over, and start attacking anyway, and just give up the d5 square, but have plenty of other good play on the Shah side. So some modern players are going to be really fine with the white pieces here, despite what Al-Alaj thought. But knight e2 is certainly a completely valid way to go, and now the d4 pawn is looking a bit overextended. So pawn to c5. Yeah, the fact that the black has to do something to defend the d4 pawn makes me a little worried for him that he's gotten overextended. So if d takes e3, looks like white can just throw in f takes. With the idea of f takes, knight takes, and now this pawn on e3 is going to fall anyway. So it's going to leave white up a pawn. E takes f4 is also possible here. And then we could see e takes, and then I think knight g6, because bishop d6 to try to guard this way is going to run into c5. So that's going to get messy. So e takes, knight g6. This looks perfectly playable for black. White is missing his rook lift. So and the f4 pawn is not going to be too weak because the bishop can come out and hold it. So so e takes f4, probably not e takes d4 because the knight's misplaced. Knight takes is possible, but then bishop d6 probably hits it. And then e takes here, and now pawn to c5. White can throw in pawn to b4 here. This pawn's going to be really weak, so the knight has to come to d7 to defend. Pawn takes, rook b1, king c7, bishop a3. There's going to be some problems here for there's going to be some problems here for black on this pawn, but the position looks totally playable for black because these knights are misplaced. It's going to take white some time to play knight d2, knight b3, and try to hit this, and in the meantime black's going to come up with king c6, and there's going to be enough holding, and black will eventually try to play bishop d6, b4. So this looks kind of like my game against Record from the second World Blitz event in the second round, and just with the colors reversed. And you know, it's a completely different opening to get there, but you know, so yeah, my gut tells me if you're black here, go ahead and throw in e takes. The problem with c5 is that now white seems to have all of the play. Oh well, and yes, so actually black's dropping a pawn here. So f takes, knight takes. Yeah, this is a big problem for black. But Sam doesn't go for it yet. He plays bishop h3. Oh, and then we see g6. So I get that white's planning to play f5 and e4, and this is just going to be a really massive attack because black is going to be really on the defensive there. But I think this is, again, like this is probably another moment. It's a moment to try something a little bit maybe creative or desperate with e takes, knight g6, d takes, b takes. This pawn is going to be really weak, but black's at least going to have some open lines. And yeah, I worry about, you know, pawn to g6, it prevents the one threat, but it does not solve this problem here. So black goes down a pawn, d takes, bishop takes. So now black is down a pawn and white has really nice lead in development. So this is where looks like critical mistake has been made by black now. Okay, so we see a few exchanges. Furzian comes up. Okay, I guess it's supporting d4. That looks fine for white. You know, if I were white here, yeah, okay, all right. So yeah, so okay, so white. Oh, all right. So I see what happened. So here, black should just go ahead and take off a pair of rooks. You want to take off one pair of rooks to try to make a draw. And black's down a pawn here, but that's usually not enough to make the position losing in Shatranj. So king d7, bishop a6, rook f8. Black's doing okay here. I mean, black's down a pawn and he's going to have to suffer. But if black focuses on piece development, then you know, he's going to continue to have chances. But instead, okay, this guy got overextended, and now it died, and then okay, and then g takes, knight takes. Okay, and this is game over. All right. So just to kind of sum up, I think you know, if I had words of advice then for Joshua on this game that you played. So one, you know, keep working on tactics, keep working on board vision. But I think in terms of strategy, what you can do better and you can immediately start applying to your next game is be very careful about overextending your position. Anytime you are going past the 5th rank as black and you're going on to the 4th rank, or conversely, if you're white, anytime you're going on to the 5th rank. You just have to be really careful, and you should ask yourself the basic question: how is my development? How are my pieces? Am I more developed than the opponent? If you're more developed than the opponent, maybe you can risk it. Uh, you know, like let's say that you have an extra 3 tempi, then maybe you can risk it. But if you're not, like here, you have 2 pieces developed and white has 2 pieces developed. So that should tell you that this is not a time to risk playing big onto the onto that rank. And here, when we get to this position, again, so in this position, white and black are kind of about equal in terms of development. You should be looking to finish your development and figure out how to continue with good development. And I think the way to get a kind of an edge in development here would be to play rook takes, knight e5, maybe attack this guy, pawn to h3, and you can just play, you know, king d7, bishop a6, rook f8. And you're down a pawn, but other than that, your position is really good. But instead, what we saw is, you know, you're not actually up any time in development, but we see like just really risky play, like going onto that 5th rank. And of course, board vision would help with this too. But if you caution yourself and you say, well, I'm going past my home area, what does this mean in terms of development? You'd probably start to get some antennae going up saying, you know, this might be a really bad move. And then here with g5, you know, it probably wasn't a great move anyway because the elephant was going to eat it. But yeah, this is a board vision problem. Just something to keep working on. I have a tactics trainer developed on the Anki platform for Shatranj. If you're interested in that, message me, and I can send you the beta version. As over 130 problems, should just help straighten out some of these board vision issues. Okay, thank you guys.